Welcome back to Global Business Africa. Let's turn our attention up north to Egypt. The government over there has announced that electricity prices for households will go up by 42%. Now, this is part of a state reform program that's been running for years. It will include removing power subsidies entirely over the next few years. Now, the new tariff increases range from 18 to 42%, depending on consumption levels. It will take place in this month's bill. Now, the government is making this move to repair public finances as part of a reform program hailed by the IMF. Egypt, of course, started a program of price increases in 2014 to gradually lift domestic electricity subsidies. Now, they were meant to be eliminated entirely in the next 2 years, but the phase-out plan has been pushed forward to 2021, in part due to the country's current economic climate. Let's get the latest details on these price hikes. Adel Mahrouhi is live in Cairo with more data on the story. He's been following it in detail for us from there. Adel, the government has raised prices on one hand, but it's extended the subsidies for another 3 years. So what's the rationale of raising prices on one hand, but still keeping those subsidies for a longer period of time?
Well, basically, Roman, what happened in November when the government decided to float the Egyptian pound is that the Egyptian pound lost nearly half its value. And therefore, all the government's import, which includes, of course, gas and petroleum that is used to generate electricity here, has also doubled. And therefore, what the government has previously planned to be about 40 billion Egyptian pounds of subsidies for electricity. It went up to 80 billion. That's about $4.5 billion. So the budget has suffered more deficit, and therefore they are keeping the subsidies, the initial subsidies of the 40 billion Egyptian pounds. And what they're trying to do now is to gradually rearrange its structure so that the government would only pay its initial budget last year. So basically what happened after what happened today of price increase, as you quickly explained, from 18 to 42% for households, with 18% for the least consumption up to 42% to the highest. With this price change, the government will now pay its subsidies will go down from 4.5 to nearly $3 billion. So it is still paying more than what it initially planned to cover the electricity subsidies.
Indeed, but let's dig into those numbers in a little more detail, because as I recall, the original budget for subsidies, at least for the last fiscal year, was about $1.7 or so billion, but what the government ended up paying was much closer to 3.6. So if that trend continues all the way to 2021, can Egypt afford to keep these subsidies in place?
Well, Egypt, of course, it cannot maintain to keep paying for these subsidies. The state newspaper today said that the government pays subsidies now for about 4.4 billion. That's about 1 billion more than what you've mentioned, and that's mainly why there is a problem now, and that's why the government has moved quite soon to increase the prices again. So it can never sustain that. There is a huge budget deficit. The country has been trying to decrease this deficit by mainly taking its hand out from subsidizing power primarily, and try to take whatever it has left in the budget to support the poorest segments of Egyptians through ration cards and other ways of direct financial support. The power subsidies is not the end of the, or today's, price hikes is not the end of the plan. They will continue up until the fiscal year of 2018-2019, which was previously the deadline to lift the subsidies entirely. Now this year will be when the government would reach its initial budget, and as you said, they will extend it's a plan to ease the burden of Egyptians. That's why it is extending the period to reach the fiscal year of 21-22, as you've mentioned, but it has to do it gradually because Egyptians cannot really sustain that further.
Indeed. Just to give our viewers a bit of context, $4 billion is just about what Kenyans spent building the first phase of their rail line from Nairobi to Mombasa. One last question for you, Adel. So prices are going up by 42% maximum for some households. But what about industrial users of electricity? Are they also facing a price hike?
Well, yes, they are facing a price hike as well. But instead of the 18 to 42% that the households have faced, they have witnessed a price hike from a minimum of about 29% up to 46%. So it is becoming higher. At least the lower segments in the business consumption are paying 30% extra, and the maximum users will pay nearly half more than what they used to do, which means it will reflect definitely in the market and products that mainly depend on electric power to generate products which are definitely a lot. It is a huge number. The government is trying quickly to recover. As you've mentioned, what it pays in subsidies is a huge number, and if it went to development, Egypt's economy could recover much faster.
Indeed, we'll leave it there for the time being. Thank you for the update. That's Adel Mahuri, of course, they're live in Cairo.